You like watching Duel Link's YouTube videos, so I'm sure you probably enjoy dueling. Maybe you like to play for fun, maybe you like to play competitively, maybe you like a bit of both, maybe you're just trying your best. Everybody is different and everybody gets whatever kind of enjoyment they want out of this game. But I've noticed that many people don't play competitively, not because they don't want to, but because it can be a bit intimidating to get started. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know to get started in tournaments, so you might be able to try it out and see if you would enjoy them. The most important thing about starting anything is you gotta believe in yourself. I know that might sound cringy, but hear me out. The first time you play in a tournament, you're probably not going to win the whole tournament. Most of the other duelists are probably more experienced than you, so they not only know the best things to do in a tournament and before a tournament, but they also aren't going to be as nervous as somebody who is playing in a tournament for the first time.
Undead, how are you gonna tell us to believe in ourselves and then tell us we're gonna lose?
If your goal is to do well in tournament, then you have to keep these things in mind when you start. A lot of people already have these things in mind, and those people probably don't appreciate me telling them that they're right. This is probably what's stopping them from getting into tournaments in the first place. And here I am, looking like I'm bullying them, telling them to just believe in themselves and then telling them that they're gonna lose. The first step to being good at something is to be bad at it. How can you expect to become better at something if you don't practice? I know everybody wants to be the guy that shows up and immediately wins their first tournament, showing off just how innately skilled they are, and that would definitely be a cool feeling, but nobody expects you to show up and win that easily on their first try. In fact, people actually enjoy watching people grow as a duelist through experience. When you lose a duel, whether it be in a tournament or ranked or anywhere else, you have a personal choice to make. You can choose to take it as a loss or take it as a lesson. If you lost a duel, the majority of the time there is going to be something you can look back on during the duel that you could have done better. Maybe you made a misplay. Maybe you got upset and acted recklessly. Maybe there was a deck building choice that needs to change. Maybe you just didn't know the opponent's deck that well. These and many other things are things that you can learn from when you lose a duel. And the more losses you take, the more lessons you can learn. Eventually, you learn so much that you stop making so many mistakes, you build your decks better, you don't get nervous or upset, and you already know what your opponent is going to do before he does it. These are the kinds of skills that nobody can teach you. I can teach you the intricate rules of the game, I can teach you how to play your decks, how to build your decks, I can teach you how to invest your gems wisely, I can tell you different methods of dealing with certain situations. But if you want to make less mistakes, build your own decks better without help, keep your mood in check, and know your opponent's decks well, then the only way you're going to learn these skills is through experience. You can get all of that experience in any kind of PvP dueling, as long as you're playing against another person. It's your brain and your cards against their brain and their cards. You will learn these things, but it's a lot easier to go unranked and take losses because the person you dueled doesn't know who you are, and you don't have to tell anybody that you lost. Only you know that you lost, so it's less embarrassing. I get it, man. Nobody really wants to lose, so it can be embarrassing to lose. But if you learn from that loss, people will respect you for it. And if you lost due to something that was truly out of your control, people will sympathize with you and say, yeah man, you were just unlucky that time. Every emotion that you feel when you're growing as a duelist, tournament duelists have been through it too. There's no way that they would be as good as they are if they hadn't also lost a bunch and learned from their own losses. In the 6K community Discord, the players all want to help each other and any newcomers to become the best they can all be. So they talk about strategies for beating decks, and they talk about things you can do to become better, and they make sure that if you want to understand something, they will find a way that makes sense. Even if you don't want to play in tournaments, being a part of this community or a similar community can help you have a healthy outlook on the game, as no matter what problems arise, there will be people around you working together to find a solution. If you find a tournament Discord where the community is healthy with each other and you can ask questions, you'll get better. And if you are afraid of your losses being public knowledge, know that everybody will respect you as long as you are respectful about it as well. Nobody likes a sore loser, but everybody likes somebody that learns from their experiences. So if you are feeling nervous about joining in on tournaments, have some faith in yourself that you are a good learner, and if you are willing to put yourself out there into high stress situations, that you can grow from them. I believe in your ability to learn, so you gotta believe in your own ability to learn too. It's all well and good to tell you to believe in yourself, but you're still going to need some tangible methods to prepare you for a tournament. The biggest thing when it comes to tournament preparation is research. In order to beat your opponents, you have to know what your opponents are trying to do. I'm not telling you to learn every deck in the game here, you just gotta learn everything you can about the decks that you think you are going to be dueling against. You can look at a tier list to see which decks you should be expecting to see in a tournament, and learn how those decks are played, figure those weaknesses out. You can read the cards to figure out the deck's game plan and see what the strengths of the game plan don't cover, cover to find a weakness. You can talk to people who play those decks to learn how the decks work and what you can do to beat them. You can watch the Advanced Guide series on this channel to learn how decks work, or you can watch any of the Duel Links YouTubers to see replays of the decks being played. You can even ask people in the 6K community Discord to use those decks against you so you can get practice against them. This way you can learn which of your decks are going to be the most helpful for you against the decks you are going to be fighting against. If you end up fighting against a tournament that you aren't prepared for, then before the next tournament, you can learn everything you can about that deck so you are better prepared for it next time. The tournament's rules are always dictated by those who are holding the tournament, and rules are not always the same for every tournament. It is important that you know what the rules are so you know what you can and cannot get away with, and what your opponent can and cannot get away with, so that you don't accidentally break the rules, and so that the opponent can't break the rules against you. It is also important to know what kind of tournament you are playing in, as there are different kinds of tournaments, so be sure to read the rules before entering so you can understand how the tournament will proceed. I'll talk about different tournament rules that may come up for you. The two main forms of tournaments are bracket tournaments and Swiss tournaments. I'll talk about brackets first. A bracket tournament is where everybody who signs up is paired against somebody to duel them, and whoever loses their match is removed from the tournament, and then the next round begins, and all the people who won in the previous round are given new opponents. This is basically what a bracket looks like. You're essentially trying to climb to the top using your fellow competitors as a ladder. This way every round, the competitors are cut in half until only two are remaining, and then the final match occurs with just those two people, and the winner is the champion of that tournament. This is a single elimination, where if you lose a single match, you are eliminated from that tournament. There is another type of bracket called a double elimination bracket, which is just like a single elimination bracket, except that if you lose inside of the single elimination bracket, you are put into a separate bracket, sometimes called the losers bracket. The further you got in the original bracket, the further along you will be placed in the losers bracket, so that your effort isn't all for nothing. And the idea is that whoever wins the losers bracket gets to fight the winner of the original bracket at the end of the tournament. Some tournaments have it so that the winner of the winners bracket gets to have a second chance if they lose against the winner of the losers bracket. Some tournaments prefer not to have it that way, but regardless, whoever wins becomes the champion of that tournament, so in this way you might still win even if you just lost one match. The other main kind of tournament is a Swiss tournament. The idea of this is that each player who joined the tournament will be given an opponent in round 1, and if they win that round they are given a point. If they lose, then they don't get any points. After that, each player is paired up against a different player, and whoever wins gets a point, and whoever loses doesn't get a point. This process is repeated, making certain that no players face against each other twice, and it is repeated for a certain amount of rounds until a certain condition is met depending on the tournament. Some tournaments continue these rounds until the amount of rounds is met where only one person has the highest amount of points, and that person is declared the winner. Some tournaments prefer to only continue it until a certain amount of people, a multiple of 4, have a certain amount of points or more. This is called the top cut. Depending on the amount of people who join the tournament, it could be a top 64, a top 32, a top 16, a top 8, or a top 4. This way, a single elimination bracket can be held for the top cut to determine the winner. Whoever organizes this tournament is going to have their preference for what kind of tournament they want to run. So make sure to pay attention to which kind of tournament it is, and they might even have a totally different format that they'll explain. So pay attention before you enter a tournament. We also have to talk about deck submission and matches here. I'll have to talk about them a bit interchangeably here since they are so closely related. In a tournament, you're going to be limited by some rule for what you are allowed to play. Most of the time, you will only be allowed to play one deck. Some tournaments allow you to play 2 decks, maybe even 3 decks. If you are only allowed to play 1 deck, then you may be allowed to play a side deck, which is a small collection of cards that you may choose to change your deck throughout the tournament, but that itself is also restricted by certain rules. A match in a tournament doesn't necessarily just mean one duel. Some tournaments will be called best of 1, in which you and your opponents only duel one time to determine the winner. However, the majority of tournaments are formatted as best of 3, meaning that you and your opponent must duel up to 3 times, and the first person to win twice in that interaction wins the match overall. If you have a side deck, that means starting from the second game out of those 3 games, you may swap some cards out from your deck and replace them with cards from your side deck. Tournaments will have rules restricting how many cards you can have in your side deck. For example, in the Team 6K community Discord tournaments, side deck can be a maximum of 8 cards, or 7 cards with a skill counted as the 8th card. It is important to remember that in your first duel you aren't allowed to have your side deck cards in your deck, so after you have completed a match with somebody where you used your side deck, remember to put your side cards back out of the deck and put your deck back to normal. Some tournaments, instead of having a side deck, will allow a second deck, where between games you can change which deck you are playing. You may only submit as many decks as that tournament allows you to submit, and you can't play any decks other than the decks that you submitted. And in general, you aren't allowed to change the decks at all during a tournament. They always have to be the same as when you submitted them. But with this, you get the added freedom of being able to choose between your decks during the first game out of the best of 3 match. Remember that you can't play in a tournament unless you submit your deck list in a way that the tournament organizer says to. Like for the 6K community Discord tournaments, you send your deck and side deck to the judge in charge of the tournament. Earlier, we talked about the research you can do to give you the knowledge you need for a tournament, but what can you physically do to prepare yourself for the competition? Well, the main thing is building your main deck and side deck, as of course your cards are the tools you're going to be using to fight your opponents. Look at your deck and see if there are any cards you feel wouldn't be good against the decks you think you're going to be fighting against. See if your strategy has any weaknesses that can be exploited by any of the decks you will be facing against. It is okay for a deck to have a weakness. At the end of the day, every deck has weaknesses, but we can still do something about it. Your deck should be built to fight against the majority of the decks you are aiming to fight against. If there are 5 decks that your deck will be fine against, but there are 2 decks that will give you a hard time, don't change your deck for them, because you will be weakening yourself against the other 5. You want to be able to keep your strength against those 5, because it's important to play to your strengths to give you as many wins as possible. For the decks we are weak against, we can use our side deck. The side deck isn't very big. At max it's only 8 cards, so you can't hope to beat every deck in the game with your side deck cards. Instead, you should consider the 3 decks that you are most afraid of when you're playing your deck of choice. Maybe you aren't even afraid of 3, but are only afraid of 1 or 2 decks. That's fine. But if it's 3 or more decks, just focus on the 3 you feel you are most likely to face against, because you don't want to spread yourself so thin that you don't beat any of them. Once you've figured out which 3 you are most afraid of, you can build your side deck, splitting up the space to the degree that you feel is best. You have to figure out which cards would help you against those decks, so that in the second and third game of the match you have a better chance to beat those decks. You can think of any cards you know of in the game that you think would be helpful against those decks, and if you need help, you can talk to other duelists about what cards they think are good against those decks. Make sure that the card or cards you choose to play against a deck is something that is realistic for you to use in your game plan. Like Dimensional Fissure might be good against a lot of decks, but if playing it also hurts your own strategy, then you shouldn't be playing it. Once you've found the best card or cards to deal with the decks you're afraid of, you dedicate space in your side deck to those cards. It is even better if there is one card that helps you against multiple of these 3 decks that you are afraid of, since it will give you more space in your side deck to help you in more situations. If the card you have chosen to help you is a card that you can search for in your deck, you might want to choose to play 1 copy of it in your side deck so that you have more room for other cards. Sometimes your extra deck might be too tight to play certain cards that would help you in certain matchups, so you could play single copy of those in your side deck as well, since they don't take up too much room. If you truly need to be able to draw a card that you can't search for in your side deck, then you should probably put 3 copies of that card into your side deck to give you the best chances of getting it. When you are using your side deck, you aren't allowed to change the size of your actual deck, so you have to also take out an equal amount of cards to the amount of side deck cards that you put in. To make the decision easier, look at the cards in your deck and ask yourself, would I rather have this in my deck or this sideboard card in my deck? The card in your deck might still be good against that opponent, but it may not be as good as the side deck card, and it might be wise to take it out even though it's good, because it isn't as good as the side card. The utility of the side deck can sometimes make people a bit overzealous. They make their deck less versatile because they think that if they lose, their side deck will save them. The first duel in a match makes a big difference in a match. Even if you can still win after losing the first duel, you cannot guarantee that you will win, and you cannot guarantee that you will draw your side deck cards in the second and third games. So you should make sure that your main deck remains versatile so that it can face a variety of decks, only becoming more laser focused in the second and third games. The difference between a noob and a scrub is that a noob is somebody that is new to something and only learning about it, while a scrub is somebody that refuses to accept the fact that they are able to improve. Scrubs don't learn from their mistakes. Instead, they blame Konami for the way the game is, they blame their opponents for being lucky, they blame their opponents for playing degenerate decks, they blame Konami for the fact that they don't own the deck that they believe would let them win if they had it. They blame everything except for themselves, and they become bitter and they don't enjoy anything. I am not saying that you are at fault for everything that ever happens to you. There are truly times when you are unlucky. There are truly times where Konami needs to rebalance the game. There are truly times when something might be too expensive or paywall, but these are hindrances. By themselves, they cannot be to blame for all of your losses. We gotta be able to recognize the difference between bad luck and something we can learn from. Most of the time, if we lose a duel, we can build our deck differently, we can side deck more efficiently, we can make different plays next time, and we can understand our opponent's decks better. Accepting defeat is not just about being okay with the fact fact that you lost. It's about knowing that it's okay that you lost and taking something positive from it. In the 6K community Discord, we like to say that the only L's we take are lessons. And if you don't want to play in tournaments at all, this is still a mindset you can use to grow as a duelist in general. The last thing I'll say is that stress and nerves are a natural part of competition, but the more you do it, the less stressful it will be, so keep that in mind. If you would be interested in giving tournaments a try, if you've played in tournaments before but feel unsure about yourself, or if you've never been in a tournament at all, this Saturday at 1 PM EST, our Discord is going to be holding a beginners tournament, so you can duel against people that feel similarly to you, and you can learn together against each other, and maybe break the mental barrier that's been holding you back from joining in on tournaments. After that tournament, we are also going to have our World Championship match where the winner of last weekend's World Championship contender tournament will face against our current world champion, Abu Zara, and we are going to be streaming it, so remember to hit the bell to witness the first championship match of the year live. We have competitive tournaments every other week, like last week was our World Championship contender tournament, and next week will be our Intercontinental Championship contender tournament, and then the weeks between, we hold events like this beginner tournament, and then after that the championship match as the main event. If you are interested in participating in any Team 6K tournaments, they are announced every week inside of the community Discord. Link is in the description, so don't miss out. I sure hope you guys have found this video helpful in some way. I want to break down the barriers between casual and competitive players, so that's why I made this video. If you guys have any questions, be sure to leave them in the comments and we can talk about it. And if you like the video, then slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell to get notified every time we make a new video. Have yourselves a good one, guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't ask them to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake, but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast.